So, this episode is called Regularity Bonus Extra Credit. If you perked up when you read bonus extra credit, then you're exactly the target audience I'm hoping to reach with this one. And that is busy overachievers. So, last time we talked about how to build regularity. And what's behind the idea of regularity is comically simple and obvious. We need to spend consistent time with those we want to establish a friendship with. And last time we talked about a bunch of ways to build regularity into our daily lives. And as I was recording that episode, I just hear this little voice in the background, basically the busy overachiever voice saying, look, I have a super demanding job. Between that and family, I don't have the time to fit regular time with friends into my busy schedule. And if you are someone who's experiencing that, I totally get you. And there's still a way. So that's what the bonus extra credit is for. If your company is IPOing in 6 months, there is a big job change you're making. I think it's fine to table friendship and deprioritize that for maybe a year, maybe two even. But I think any longer than that, the quality of our life will suffer. So I think even if that's the case, I wouldn't table it for too long because too often we kick the friendship ball down the line. It's just never a super high priority. But I think in the long run, as all these health longevity studies will tell us, that's what people care about in the long run. That's really what make their quality of life better. But too often, people say, I'll have more time for friends after I find a partner, or after I make partner in my firm, or after my kids are older, or when my kids are in college, or when I'm retired. And we keep pushing that target back and not finding the time for connection and friendships in our current lives. I think that sentiment is understandable, especially when we're stressed and overwhelmed. But I want to say that this is what this episode is about. I'm trying to present this attractive alternative so that even if you're a busy overachiever with a lot of goals in your head that you want to achieve, I would say you can probably find 30 minutes per week to devote to building regularity. And moreover, I promise that you will get more productivity out of that 30 minutes. What's that magical 30-minute bonus thing, you ask? Cue dramatic music. That is an accountability partner. I know an accountability partner sounds very plain, boring, and unsexy, but I'm hoping that by the end of this episode, you'll start to see the nuance, the beauty, and the power of having an accountability partner, and how that can be both a way to bring new friends into our lives and also to get in touch or hang out with an old friend, and at the same time, help you achieve your hard to reach goals. So I'll just start with an example. Recently, I was in touch with someone, let's call her Allison. She's an executive who works remotely. And not only that, she lives in a very remote part of the country. While it's great for her hobby in wildlife photography, it's not good for making and meeting new friends. Did meet someone online through a mutual friend. And during that call, the other person was saying how she's struggling turning her PhD thesis into a book. And she had to do that really quickly as part of a publishing deal. And at that time, Allison was struggling with a lot of business development tasks that she keep postponing forever. Hearing about the other person's book challenge, she proposed, how about we touch base every Monday, max 30 minutes, just to keep each other accountable for those hard to complete tasks. And they've been doing calls weekly ever since. And she said it's worked like magic. With the support and help of the accountability partner whom she's developing a friendship with, she is able to reach her goal. It's kind of killing two birds with one stone. It's a win-win situation. It will help you achieve your goals, and at the same time, build a new friendship. Accountability partners can also be used to bring an old friend back into your life. I was just speaking with one of my neighbors who was a competitive ultimate frisbee player, but he hasn't played competitively for 10 plus years. And about a year ago, a friend of his got back in touch and they talked about getting back into the tournament circuit. And because they've been out of practice for so long, the friend proposed that they do training together. So they have a trainer that will train them remotely, just giving them various exercises. And the two of them will get on Zoom for as short as 5 minutes and as long as 30 minutes every week, just to go over their exercises, how they did. Since then, they've been going back to tournaments and doing pretty well. So that's an example of bringing an old friend back into your life through this accountability partner. So the beauty of the accountability partner is you get to serve your ambition as well as your need for connectivity at the same time. It's just a win-win all around. So I want to share a personal example of accountability group. Right after I finished grad school and moved back to Boston, I was starting a career information startup, and I had no clue what I was doing. One thing I did know was that I needed some additional support. So I actually found this women's peer goal setting group online. It's a group that met in person in a cafe in downtown Boston. I still remember the first time I showed up to the meeting. There were 3 other women. One was working on a book, one was finishing her PhD thesis, and one was making a big career change. And the founder of the group ran the group with military precision. She had a timer, and your time is up as soon as the timer beeps, and you gotta move on to the next person. After a few months, the original founder moved away, so it was just 3 of us left. After that, it had more of a Sex and the City brunch vibe. So we met over coffee or brunch and talked about our goals, but there was no more timer involved. And it worked just as well, I think. And over time, I think all of us made more progress than we would have on our own. And after some time, one of the other person dropped off the group, and it was just me and let's call her Layla. So it was just me and Layla. We continued to meet. And then after a while, we just became friends. And we've been friends ever since. And it's been 15 years. But she moved away a few years ago. And that's the problem with remote friendship. It's really hard to stay present in one another's lives. I think we tried. We met up over coffee or meals, and we even did some antiquing trips together. I was really happy that last year I was able to anchor her back into my life through the exact same way that we met. Last year, I was sort of lamenting to another local friend. Let's call her Jane. I was lamenting to Jane how I enjoy creating things, but I create very different things. Over the last couple of years, I created a career coaching chatbot. I did a renovation and did a lot of creative work with designing a house. Now I'm doing a podcast and I create moth-style personal stories, but they're all very different. And I like the fact I get to create in different realms. Don't get me wrong, it's a joy and a privilege. But the unfortunate downside of that is I don't have a community. I don't have a group of people that I can create with, share ideas with, because I'm not a serious creator in any one of the realms. If I join, say, a writer's group, I would just feel like a poser because I don't know if I'm writing seriously after I finish a particular story, for example. So the lack of community was really troubling me. When I was talking to Jane, she was talking about her new interest in singing and songwriting. And, she had her own creative struggles. And then I remembered Layla, who moved out of town. She is a fine artist, and then she's also somewhere on her own creative journey. So I thought, maybe the 3 of us can get together and support one another in our creative path. And so we got together in one afternoon. We all kind of clicked and got along really well. So ever since then, we've been meeting every Monday over Zoom to talk about our creative process. Even though we create in very different realms, I think there's a lot of underlying thread that is common to all creative endeavors. The self-judginess, perfectionist tendencies, and difficulty in sort of sharing our creations with others because we, judge it too harshly. And those are just some of the very common creative issues across board. So we're able to support one another in our creative process. In fact, last May, when I was practicing for the Moth Grand Slam, I remember bringing to the group that, it's so tedious. I just have to practice this again and again and just to really get the story down pat so I don't blank out on stage. And Jane asked a question. She said, well, can you bring some creativity into that practice process like you do with story writing? And it really got me thinking. And what I end up coming up with is this whole protocol for how to practice under stress. For example, I practice walking up a hill when I'm out of breath. I practice with TV on, so with some visual distraction. I practice having Dan play random laugh track to interrupt me during the story and still not lose my place. And it worked really well. It kept the practice process much more fun rather than treating it like a chore and a drudgery, which I was before. And I think without that question and without the creative group, I never would have thought of that because I was just too zoomed in on my task. And I think that's one of the beauty of the creative group. When someone asks you a open-ended question, it allows you to sort of zoom out and see your situation from a different perspective. And that sometimes can be wildly helpful. So I've just shared a couple examples of how an accountability group can help us make new friends and also deepen old friendships. But I still feel like I'm not really doing it justice. I'm not quite capturing the beauty and nuance of an accountability group because the term just sounds so boring. So let me try to list a few things out. So first and most, accountability group works. And I have intimate professional knowledge of that because as a career coach, part of my function is to provide accountability to people. And in fact, I've recommended to a number of my clients to do a separate accountability group on top of coaching because they need extra consistent practice in reaching their goals. And oftentimes, the reason why we don't get there is we sort of run away from it. We can not look at something and stick our head in the sand for months and years at a time. And the beauty of the accountability group is that it keeps bringing us back week after week. And if we just consistently apply a little bit of effort and make a little bit of progress week after week, it really adds up over time. I think that little bit of support and warmth and healthy peer pressure will give us that space to keep coming back to the goal that we hold dear. I'm a firm believer in its efficacy. The other thing is that if you're someone who's not super open, it provides a really safe playground to open up, talk about your challenges. So it's very easy to practice vulnerability and connecting. If you're someone that would like to practice that, but you don't want to be starting with what happened in childhood, right? That's just way too much and it may not be relevant. But if it's connected to a particular goal you want to achieve, and then maybe it's even work related, it's much easier for us to find a key to opening up in that context. So third, remember the first episode was about asking open-ended questions. Having an accountability group provides us another way to practice asking open-ended questions. We're not trying to give other people advice. I think some of the best things we can do for each other in the accountability group is just to listen, be supportive, and maybe ask one or two open-ended questions to help the other person zoom in and zoom out of their struggle they're part of currently. And that can be more helpful than if you strategized and brainstormed and told the other person what to do. So that's the third subtle beauty of accountability partner. Another one is that it also provides us a good practice ground for supporting other people in our lives who we may have more entwined with or more of a conflict of interest with, like supporting our partner or our children. We have more of a vested interest in their actions and behavior. And sometimes that added interest can make it that much harder. But when you practice being supportive in an accountability group, your interests are not tied together. It's much easier to practice that skill. And finally, this is another subtle beauty that I don't think I'm quite getting across, and that is building shared context. One reason why an old friend feels different than a new friend is that you have a lot of context. I just see Dan interacting with his best friend. Sometimes somebody will say something, and then the two of them look at each other, and then they just crack up laughing. It's almost like they can hear each other's thoughts. They've known each other and been best friends since they were in fourth grade. And so they have a ton of context to draw on. And the beauty of the accountability group is that even though it's a small slice of time, but you build up this context week after week. Say one person's goal is to get a promotion at their job. So they may go and talk about something that happened at work today with a friend that doesn't have any context. And then they have to really say a lot of backstory for that friend to even get what they're talking about. If you speak to your accountability group who's been following your ups and downs for the last 6 months, you say some little thing, and then they're like, oh, I see what's happening, right? They get it right away. And to be gotten is a really precious thing in life. The way we build that is through regularity of interaction and giving one another better context as to who we are, how we think, what we struggle with, and just exposing bits of that. It doesn't have to be telling someone your entire life story. If we sort of leaving these breadcrumbs over several months, you'd be surprised at the context you develop over time. So hopefully now you're at least curious and intrigued about the prospect of starting an accountability group. I guess the first step is to ask yourself the question, what goal do I have that's very important to me that I've been procrastinating over? Whether it's getting in shape or change my career or write that book. If there's something you have in mind, then it could be a good thing to consider starting an accountability group. If you're thinking about that, I have 4 tips I want to share to hopefully make it a more successful experience. Tip number 1 is give your group a name so that it's not called an accountability group. Our first group was called Nova. The second group, we call it creativity group or creative group. Yeah, just go at it. Give it a name because accountability group just sounds so bad. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is around the optimal number of people to have in your group. I would say 2 or 3 is a good number. When you have 2 people, it's just easy to organize, and then you both get time to share. You can do it every week. And also it can be really short and sweet. You could get a lot done in just 20 minutes. One person share for 10 minutes, the other person share for 10 minutes. Especially if you're super busy, it's very easy to fit 20 minutes into your weekly calendar. 3 is pretty good as well, because if one person goes on vacation, you could have another person that you meet at that regular time. So it doesn't break your schedule as much, but you do need a slightly longer time to meet, which isn't a problem. So I think 2 or 3 is pretty good. Anything bigger than that, I wouldn't recommend more than 4, because then there's sort of a logistical timing issue, scheduling issue, and also the amount of time you have to meet gets longer. Right? So you really have to balance how much individual time each person have, and then also how long the entire meeting is. So I would say no more than 4, particularly if you're meeting every week. Tip number 3 is who you select as your accountability partner. Generally, you want to avoid people who are very critical or who will behave critically toward your goal. The beauty of the accountability group is to have a safe space to sort of unload your struggles, your trials and tribulations, and just to sort of let it out and process it. if your accountability partner is poking holes in your plan, it's like we already poke holes in our own plans. That typically is not very helpful. So I would say find an accountability partner that will provide you more positive energy toward the goal you're driving toward. All right, so the last tip is whether to find someone with similar goals as you're trying to achieve. Like if you're trying to write a book, should I find someone else that's trying to write a book? Or find someone with very different goals? I think in this case, both can work, and it depends on a couple of factors. One is if you're working with someone with very similar goals, you might be able to share experience, resource, and knowledge around that goal. For example, in that ultimate frisbee training example, they're actually sharing a trainer. If you are both writers, you might be able to even critique each other's writing and be more involved in one another's project. That could be positive. The downside is that you could be competitive with one another. Say if one person is making leap and bounds of progress to achieving their book goal, they're on chapter 10 and you're still trying to write your intro to chapter 1, that could make you feel really bad. Unless you're a competitive personality that can maybe help motivate you. But I think even in that case, in the long run, it's better to find a source of support that you can come back to rather than the short-term competitive energy you can get from someone that's in competition with you. Once you have a goal in mind, ask yourself, would I feel more comfortable with someone that's trying to achieve a similar goal? Would I feel insecure about things if I make slower progress, or am I a competitive person? So I think that answer will bubble up pretty quickly. I hope with these 4 tips in mind, you can start a successful accountability group. If you actually had experience with accountability groups in the past, feel free to share them with me. Or if you're starting one and you run into any snags, feel free to get in touch as well. Thanks for listening. Until next time.